Well, again, thank you all for joining us tonight. In the interest of everybody's time, and appreciate the folks who have been able to join us as we get started here this evening. I'm David Steffler, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at the Springfield Daily Citizen. And we're getting ready tomorrow to celebrate our second anniversary since launching the Daily Citizen website in 2022. Happy to say we've got several of our staff members and board members on the call tonight, as well as some very good friends and supporters. And we know a number of readers and listeners joining tonight's session. So again, you're going to be muted and your video is off. And that's actually going to help speed things up for you in your enjoyment of the evening. There will be an opportunity as the evening goes on for you to put questions in the chat. And if you don't know how to use the chat, you just put the cursor of your computer mouse down toward the bottom of your screen. And just toward the left, you'll see a feature called chat. And in there, then you can put questions that you have for the panel or for me. You can also message individually to other participants in the session tonight. So we're going to get started. And again, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm David Steffler, and we're going to spend just a few minutes here this evening, starting off with a rebroadcast of a video from Ozarks Public Television. And it's a rebroadcast of a show called Sense of Community. And we appreciate the support here tonight. Our co-hosts for tonight's program, KSMU and Ozarks Public Broadcasting. And we appreciate Ozarks Public Television for allowing us to rebroadcast the video here tonight. So we're going to start with a rebroadcast of the show, and in about 30 minutes after the video, we'll return with a panel of people, including Michelle Skaliski from KSMU, Christine Temple, the executive editor of the Springfield Business Journal, and the Daily Citizen's Jackie Raywald. And you'll have a chance, again, to put questions in the chat as we're talking. And at some point, Judy Kamian, our development officer, is going to be moderating, and she will summarize some of the questions for the panelists. So last fall, I was invited to be interviewed for the Ozarks Public Television show Sense of Community. Gregory Holman, a reporter and editor for KSMU Public Radio and also KOCK, Ozarks Public TV. And he wanted to talk about local news, what's happening with the decline of traditional media, and what's the future of local news in Springfield and the Ozarks. Greg and I have known each other for several years and are both former journalists of the Springfield News Leader, although our time there did not overlap. So again, our thanks to Ozarks Public Television for allowing us to rebroadcast this video. It's about 27 minutes, and I think it'll give you a good overview of the issue. And then we'll come back and have a panel discussion afterward with some questions that I'll pose, and then we'll try to get to your questions. So Judy, with that, would you cue up the video? Well, very good. Again, we appreciate Ozarks Public Television, Gregory Holman at KSMU and Ozarks Public Broadcasting for that interview and for a chance for us to share it with all of you tonight. We are going to jump right into a discussion with our three panelists. If you have questions, either something maybe that you were prompted by from the video or from the discussion that we're going to about start, just put them into the chat. That's at the very bottom of your screen. You'll find the word chat, and you can put your question into that chat. And at some point, when we get through a couple of initial questions with the panel, Judy Kamian is going to sort of moderate those questions, try to combine similar ideas and share those with the panel. So anyway, we're going to jump right in. The panelists that we have with us tonight three really great local journalists. Michelle Skaliski is the news director at KSMU. She's a reporter, producer, radio host. She became news director there in 2023. Christine Temple is the executive editor of the Springfield Business Journal. She joined the SBJ staff in 2018 and was promoted to executive editor in 2021. And Jackie Raywald is a reporter here at the Springfield Daily Citizen. She covers public safety issues, the courts. She has sort of a specialty in covering issues of the unsheltered community in Springfield and a variety of other social issues. She was one of the initial staff members hired at the Daily Citizen a little more than 2 years ago, and previously worked almost 10 years as a reporter at the Springfield News Leader. So thank you all to the panelists. And we're going to just jump right in. And Michelle, I'm going to start with you. And what I'd like all three of you to kind of address is, I understand the video may have been at some points kind of a little bit of a downer about the future of local news. So I'm wondering if you might all start off talking about what gives you the most optimism about the future of local news, particularly as it relates to Springfield, Missouri. So Michelle, would you kick us off?
Sure. I'm very optimistic about the future of local news. I think there is a big appetite in Springfield for local news. I can see a lot of support for it. We hear that all the time. We've seen staffing go down a little bit in some areas, but then, we see it being boosted in others. So there's been an ebb and flow, but the constant, I think, is that we do have a lot of journalists still in Springfield who are working to cover our local community. And here at KSMU, from the very beginning, local news has always been one of our main emphases. We really want to be sure that we are focusing on our city council, on other governmental organizations, that we're covering elections. We've had a small staff the entire time we've been in existence, but we've always made it work and we've always found a way. And I know we will continue to do that. And I can say we're always continuing to look at ways to cover local news in a better way. We're always exploring different avenues for, trying to increase our staffing. So I think, especially from my viewpoint, there's a lot of things to be positive about. You mentioned a time when there were a lot of journalists fighting for, a source. We don't necessarily see as many people, many reporters when we go to an event or a press conference. But we do have those constant sources, media outlets out there that are really intent in providing fair, accurate news and trying to, get to the truth. And so that gives me a lot of hope.
Great. Christine?
Yeah, and congratulations on the anniversary, David. It's exciting.
Yeah.
SBJ I publicly congratulated Daily Citizen when you guys entered the market 2 years ago. And I think that added a lot of optimism for my belief in local journalism, because we know that at SBJ, we're not the only ones with integrity and with resources and with the abilities to cover our community. We know that there are others out there every day doing the same. We're not going to cover the news the same way, but we feel like there's optimism because it's going to be covered. It's always a bummer if we're covering the same news as another outlet and someone else gets it first. It pushes us to be better and to figure out what is our angle and what's our unique vantage point. But I think that that's brought a lot of energy to our community to have another news outlet. I think that it also shows, like Michelle was saying, the appetite for local news, that there have been news outlets that have been sustained here that are, locally run for so many years. Springfield Business Journal is almost 45 years old and is locally owned and operated that entire time. People understand the difference of someone covering a community that they live in, that they spend money in, that they send their kids to school in. There's a difference in that coverage because we have the context of our community and we care about our community. So I feel incredibly optimistic about local journalism. I think that it's only gotten better for readers and people who consume news, even though it makes our job harder when there's so many talented people working on stories at once.
Thanks, Jackie. How about your perspective?
Well, being part of the Daily Citizen, that sort of scrappy startup, I'm somebody that gets to go out in the community and I get to hear from the public, and I get to hear them be excited about another news outlet, another locally controlled news outlet. The public is definitely excited. They're definitely, as Michelle said, hungry for that, and that's been fun. It's been I felt welcome whenever especially like at the courthouses, and people are excited to have more journalists, and that makes me feel very optimistic.
Yeah. But just to put you on the spot there for a second, Jackie, I mean, you have seen over your years in Springfield a number of journalism colleagues whose jobs have been eliminated. So what gives you optimism, I guess, at this point?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was hired at the news leader in 2012, you hired me. The newsroom was huge compared to other newsrooms I've been in, and it was packed. It was packed with reporters and editors and photographers and copy editors. And just over the 10 years I was at the news leader, I just saw that team of journalists just shrink through layoffs and cuts. And so I'm sorry, I forgot what was it?
Yeah, well, I guess, but there are still good journalists doing good journalism.
Oh yeah, definitely. But there's just fewer of us, and that's why this job is so important. Because I mean, just especially now in the times we're living, with so much misinformation out there, it's just really important that there are more journalists.
Great. Christine, I'm going to start with you this time around. Talk a little bit more about what you see the role of your organization, the Springfield Business Journal, and then likewise, Michelle and Jackie can talk about kind of what you see as your unique role in the overall ecosystem for news in Springfield, or how do you view the role of you and your staff at the Business Journal?
Yeah, so Springfield Business Journal was started in 1980 by our current owner's mother, Diane Elizabeth Osis. She felt that there was a need for very specific niche business coverage of Springfield and the surrounding area. And we cover about a 50-mile radius around the heart of Springfield. That was unusual for a city of our size to have a business journal, but businesses are the lifeblood of our community. They're what give our community fun and entertainment and also drive our community forward, provide our jobs. They impact everyone. We felt like Springfield Business Journal, and still today feel like Springfield Business Journal fills that need of telling the stories that decision makers and leaders need to know about our business community to do their jobs well. So we may cover a similar story. For instance, I think all of us cover city council coverage within Springfield, but we're all covering it from a different angle. And for us, we're looking at what are the implications to the business owner with this particular change that's being considered with council. We're always thinking about ways, or we're always thinking about what business leaders are thinking about that's keeping them up at night. And we want to cover those trend pieces as well. So a lot of our news on a daily, level, we cover business news Monday through Friday daily. It's the business news of the day very traditionally, but we have our flagship product, which is our weekly print edition, that dives into more trend topics. It's also profiles businesses in our community. A lot of people say, journalism is the first record of history, and when we look into our archives and when folks ask us questions, we find that that's really true. We have recorded the story of the Springfield business community for almost 45 years, and we have all of that wealth of information within our publication. So we call ourselves the business authority in that sense. We have a team of 7 journalists in our newsroom, and we have photojournalists and designers on top of that. And the business journal model, while we've seen community newspapers struggle and have seen layoffs and things of that nature, business journals have been doing really well across the country. We're a part of a national organization, the Alliance of Area Business Publishers. Part of that is because we found ways to diversify our business model. So we host a lot of events or editorial awards that highlight and connect business leaders in our community, but we've never compromised the integrity of our newsroom through diversifying our business model. So the integrity and the separation of our advertising and our newsroom is really distinct, and I think that continues to set us apart.
Great. Jackie, you want to try to tackle what do you see as the role of the Daily Citizen in the overall picture of news in Springfield?
Well, I've heard you talk about, use the phrase like we're filling in a lot of the gaps, especially with like our public affairs, in-depth reporting, and I feel that. I feel, with some of the 2 biggest projects that I've ever been involved with in my journalism career were the Child Care Crisis Project and the Living in Fear Project. And that kind of in-depth reporting, I've never done it anywhere else. So I think that's a big part of it. I think just that independent, locally controlled news organization, just having that kind of freedom, being able to just do those in-depth projects, I think it's really cool to be a part of that.
Great. Michelle, how about you and your view on what KSMU's sort of unique role is?
Well, first of all, we're radio. So, we have the advantage of sound and audio and bringing that rich storytelling, complete with natural sound to kind of paint the picture, bringing in the various voices where you can hear emotion. So I think that really sets us apart. But I feel so proud to be a part of a community where we have several strong news outlets that are, very well respected. And, we just kind of fit into that. This year, we're celebrating 50 years. We started in 1974 with the mission to encourage audiences to explore ideas and to deepen our shared understanding of what it means to be an engaged citizen of our community. And we really hold true to that mission today. We feel it's so important that people know about what their city council is up to, what they know, that they know who the candidates are for any given local election. School board's coming up. We're working to, let people know where the candidates stand on various issues. So, we feel a role in that. We're there with people in their car when they're heading home from work or when they're taking their kids to school. We're there with them, and I think we're unique in that respect. And like Jackie said, we really, have a public affairs mission. We really work hard to tell stories in depth. We have a quarterly series called Sense of Community, where we tackle a different topic every quarter. Most recently, we brought stories from the StoryCorps Mobile Tour to the Ozarks. Last year we did an in-depth look at the various issues that were contributing to the drop in life expectancy in Missouri. We looked at the Forward SGF Comprehensive Plan and took multiple stories to tell those topics. We did a story where we looked at rural entrepreneurship, and we had various stories that really delved deep into that. And we traveled to rural towns in the Ozarks. So I guess what sets us apart from commercial radio and typically is that we can take the time to tell the stories. We also carry NPR news magazines like Morning Edition, Here and Now, All Things Considered, and we really try hard to emulate what they're doing at the national level. We also, I know, David, you were talking about in the interview that you have news interns. For as long as I can remember, we've always had news interns here working as journalists. And I tell them, once you're trained, we're going to be sending you out in the field. We're going to be equipping you with your recorders and your cameras. You are going to be telling stories for our listeners. And so we are, training students for the future. And we have two wonderful news interns right now and an amazing news reporter in Megan McKinney, and then Rich Lawson and Courtney Scornia, and then Ben Verstrate is our student arts reporter. So Megan is graduating, just letting everybody know. She'll be graduating in May, but we always want to see them go on and be successful and carry those ethical standards of accuracy and fairness and completeness and honesty and things like that out with them when they go on to be journalists at another news outlet somewhere, whether it's here in Springfield or it's across the country. We rely on donors, so we're really proud that we have donors who believe in what we do, and they say, I want to give this amount to make possible what you guys are doing, and so we're not beholden to anyone but our listeners. So I guess those are the main things that really set us apart, I think.
Great. Just one more quick question from me, and then just a reminder to all of you who are on the session tonight. You can put a question in the chat, and we're going to have at least a half an hour, I think, to be able to try to address as many of those questions as possible. And Judy Kamian, our Chief Development Officer, is going to kind of moderate the questions. Meaning mostly she's just going to summarize, and if there are questions that should be combined, she'll try to do that. But Jackie, if you could just name one main challenge you see or one obstacle you see for local journalists going forward, what would you say is sort of the biggest obstacle you face in terms of doing good local journalism?
Well, if I got to name one, I think there are agencies and organizations, not just here locally, but everywhere, that have come to really rely heavily on their media spokesperson or, their PIO. And sometimes that's the only person you can deal with. And they just put a statement on Facebook and that's it. And they refer you to, their news release. And I mean, especially when you're doing in-depth reporting, I have questions. And if you just put a statement on Facebook and that's it, that's a one-sided conversation. I can't ask any questions. And just really being reluctant, I guess, to set up interviews with, the people in their organizations and for that in-depth reporting, or for even a daily story that you just have more questions. That's been an obstacle, a challenge I've been dealing with.
I'm grateful you didn't say that your boss was your biggest obstacle, so thank you. Michelle, how about you? Michelle, how about you? What do you see as sort of the biggest obstacle?
Well, I'll have to agree with Jackie. That is true. I think, funding is always an obstacle, although I can say we're looking at various avenues to try to, have more news content, more ability to really cover the news, more news than we are currently covering. Although I feel like We are a very small staff. We have Gregory Holman, who does an amazing job as a full-time reporter for us. And then Chris Drew is morning edition host and then a part-time reporter, does an excellent job as well. And then of course, our news interns and our news student employee and myself. I always say we're a small but mighty staff, but I can tell you, if we had funding, it'd be great to have beat reporters, someone like you mentioned earlier, Claudette Riley, who does an amazing job as the education reporter at the News Leader. People who really can cover that one topic and really become knowledgeable in that area. I think that would be nice to have if the funding was available. So,
Christine.
I think certainly more resources. I agree with you guys too, but I would say main challenge and obstacle to share something else is maintaining trust. News organizations more on a national level plummeted to the lowest they've ever been as far as people who trust organizations that share news. I think that local news has a different perspective on that and a different degree of trust. But I don't think we can take that for granted at all as journalists. I think it's fragile. Every interaction that we have with someone creates their narrative of how they feel about news. And we have to every single time treat every source and every story with the most care. And that can be challenging when you're in an environment of high pressure. You have to fill the daily news grind, you have to fill the weekly paper, and that cycle goes by so fast and so quick. But if you ever, pull back on that integrity, the rest of it is kind of meaningless. So I think that in that kind of fragile ecosystem of trust, um, helping people understand why we exist and with every single story reinforcing our mission, why we're here, and helping people get to know us better as journalists and as a publication. I think that's really important for people to see journalists. This panel is really important. We're people in this community. We're accessible. We want to hear your news. We don't have an agenda when we share news. We just want to share the facts. And so, as much as we can keep telling that story, I think it helps in this digital age when I think there's more access to news than we've ever had before. And there's more people that believe that they're sharing news than we ever have before, and they're not. And so continuing to differentiate ourselves and keep that integrity high, I think it's the biggest obstacle, but I don't think it's insurmountable by any means. And I think we're all doing it every day.
Great. So we're going to try to tackle as many of the questions as the chat as we can in the next half hour. We will end for sure by 8 p.m. So for those of you who have early Valentine's dates or other things to get to, we will be sure to finish up. And Judy, I'm going to let you kind of summarize some of the questions in the chat. And for the panelists, you don't feel obligated that you have to answer every question, but try to address the ones that you feel you have the most to offer. Judy?
Okay. Let me start with a couple of questions about balancing resources. We have a lot of people concerned about that in the audience tonight. The first question really comes from Darlene Steele, and I'm going to turn a comment into a question because I think it's a good one. She remarks that there are other independent nonprofit outlets that pay staff and function without putting up a paywall, which means requiring readers to pay for an all-access subscription. And I'm going to note here that we have two paywalled organizations, one nonprofit, one not, and one non-paywalled organization in our panels tonight. Darlene asks how a nonprofit news outlet can grant access to people who can't financially support its reporting. And I'm going to expand that if you want to take that on as well, Christine.
Do you want me to start, Judy? Is that what you were saying?
Anyone, but if you'd like to, I think it would be interesting to hear from you.
Hmm. Uh, Springfield Business Journal went to a paywalled model many years ago, and it was one of the first business journals within our national association to do so. And a lot of people said it's not going to work. You'll lose subscribers, and we've found that not to be the case. It is an incredibly important part of our business model. We would be upside down if we did not have subscription revenue at SBJ. That's the reality of paying for good journalists and paying livable wages for those folks to share the news. In terms of creating access to content for folks who can't afford it, we do offer information in front of the paywall that's related to election coverage. We think that's really critical. We also share opinion articles for free and select articles that we feel are of the public good and public interest for free in front of our paywall. We don't currently have a model for those who can't afford it. But I think that's a really interesting question and something that we need to look at for our readers. Mostly businesses cover that subscription. So that's an interesting one. Thanks for that.
Turning to other questions about resources, I'm going to amalgamate three questions for you, David. Susan Croce Kelly asks, when you see a staff big enough to cover city council meetings, all public utility board meetings, etc., she remarks that great journalism also comes from people who sit week after week in those meetings. On the flip side of that, Brandon Jensen asks, with so many newsworthy events happening in our community and so few resources, how you prioritize what to publish and what do you wish you could do if you had more resources? And Jonathan Groves adds, what new and different areas of coverage do you plan on focusing on in the next year?
Well, that's a lot of big questions there. Certainly as Michelle and Jackie and Christine all reflected earlier, we could all use more resources. But I'll say I've had a staff as large as 170, and I still didn't have enough reporters to cover everything that I wanted to cover. So, and always it's a prioritization of things. And do I think we'll go back to a day when 3 or 4 news organizations have full-time reporters sitting in every city or county meeting? No, I don't think that's likely to happen, because I don't think that the readership and the people who are willing to pay will be sufficient to support that. I think that we're going to need to continue to prioritize, and that's why, in a way, and we've all talked about how we tried to keep our missions unique to some degree. There is overlap. All 3 of us do cover the Springfield City Council in one way or another, but we try to do it from a different point of view or a different perspective. And I think you're going to see a lot of that as we continue to go on. It's always a question of, in terms of priorities, what do we think readers want to know? What do they need to know to be good citizens? And how can we help them enjoy the community more? So I think those are some of the key points. And I don't know if Michelle or Jackie or Christine want to camp on to that.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with you on all of that. I think we really do have to prioritize and think, what's really crucial for our listeners to know. And we also want to balance the harder news with the human interest stories. I feel like those are important too, just to know our fellow citizens and, who's in our community. Gregory Holman does a great job covering city council. He is at all the meetings. He covers city council lunches too. So I feel like he is very well versed in what goes on at the city. That being said, would I like to have a reporter at the city utility meetings? Yes, I would. Would I like to have some reporter at the county commission meetings? Yes, but at this time we just don't have the staff to do that. If that changes down the road, I would love to do that. I'm looking at ways to maybe bring in some more student interns who could perhaps cover some of those types of meetings. It'd be a great learning experience for them, and also a great way to bring that news to our listeners.
And I think, Christine, you've had a relatively stable staff of reporters. Jackie is a good example of someone who's really, for the better part of the last dozen years, covered some key issues like the unsheltered community in Springfield. So she has had a chance to develop an expertise, and your staff, Christine, at the Business Journal has at least been stable enough. They've been able to develop some expertise, and that's important.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's creating those sources that come to us with the news first. And we see a lot of that in the development landscape with commercial real estate, and, brokering deals to bring new retail stores in town. So yeah, that's an every week thing on some cases that our reporters, Karen Crego and Mike Cullinan, primarily cover for our weekly edition. And they have sources that they're checking in with on a regular basis to ask what's the news, what's the latest, what do I need to know? And I think that helps a lot with resources. And Jeff Pickle, covering the news on a daily basis, is already having built those relationships to create a funnel of news. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every day when we're doing news coverage, because we worked really hard to build the credibility in people that come to us, which is just so great when people share news with us directly. So if you ever have some news, you'll make a reporter's day and reach out to them.
Turning to the way that news organizations interact with their audiences, Jeff Kessinger starts this off with a great question. Trust in journalism in the United States is at an all-time low, he says again. How, as journalists, do each of you work to build trust with your audiences?
Jackie, you want to start with that?
Well, I think working really hard to make sure my reporting's right, that it's the quotes are right, the facts are right, just being diligent with my reporting and responding whenever like a reader comments on Facebook, me being the one to respond to them personally and just answer their question or try to give them information, whatever their concern is, reaching out to them like that.
Anyone else want to add?
Yeah, we try as hard as we can to be transparent, to provide links to where we got our information, to make sure we always attribute, sources. We always make sure that we let people know where we got the information from. We try to be accountable, very, very hard to be accountable, because, mistakes do happen. We're human. But when they do, we always make sure to issue a correction. We want to be very clear that we did make a mistake, and then here's the correct information. We really try hard just to respect those who we're talking to for a story. And I think it's just practicing good journalism, where we're trying to tell all sides of a story, where we're not leaning one way or another. We're really trying hard to provide all the facts and just let people make up their own mind. So I think that goes a long way, just honesty and accuracy and fairness.
And Christine, I know you mentioned trust earlier, so do you have
Yeah.
a secret sauce, a way to gain trust?
I think Michelle said the right word, which is transparency. We absolutely have made mistakes and will, I'm sure, make mistakes in the future as hard as we try to fact check every single thing. And we have multiple people read the story that have different perspectives because we acknowledge that we all have biases. That is innate to human nature. So we're aware of those. We have multiple people read every story, and if and when we make a mistake in the future, we will correct it very transparently with readers. Those are hard conversations to have, and those calls when we do make an error. I try to leave every conversation with someone feeling really good about the solution that we've come up with because every interaction is key when it comes to trust. You don't get a pass on a story if you didn't do it well or you tried to get it out there quickly because you wanted to be first. It's so easy to lose and so hard to keep. So I think it's just being diligent every single day with the work we're doing.
Tom Carlson, our board chair, just remarked that regarding trust, Benjamin Franklin said, reputations are like fine china. Once broken, they are never fully mended. So good reminder for all of us in this field. Turning a little more toward our identity as local news organizations, John Tate asks what each of you sees as the greatest advantage to the reader or listener by being able to access a more locally based organization than a traditional legacy media product. And I think I want to start with Michelle for this one.
We know our community. I've lived here my entire life. And I know a lot of our staff has been here for a very long time. And, we love our community. We live here. My kids went to school here. I go to the local parks. I know a lot of people in the community. And I think that just really provides a unique perspective on our community. And when we're deciding what to cover, we all of us know people. We have a good, just having been here a long time, we know a lot of people. And so we have a lot of people we can reach out to. I just think, having a local news outlet where you can go to not only to hear about city council and local elections, but also to find out what's going on in the community, the events that are happening, the stories like David Harrison, who's our Missouri Poet Laureate, who I got to talk to and shared an interview with him today. Those kind of stories you just don't get unless you have local outlets like KSMU, the News Leader, Daily Citizen, the Business Journal, and et cetera.
Turning to an even more hyper-local focus, this is for both KSMU and the Daily Citizen. But David, I'm going to start with you because this refers to one of our stories. Cameron Wickham asks how we think our association with Missouri State University affects our coverage of MSU. And he gives an example. A recent story reported a man arrested for making terroristic threats to the university, but Cameron observes that there was no reporting about why the problem had gone on for so long or examined safety issues on campus in general. And he asks very specifically, was there a reluctance to investigate this further because of our association with Missouri State?
Yeah, thanks.
For me, I'll go ahead, David. You go first.
Well, first of all, we are on campus at Missouri State. We do have an agreement with Missouri State that provides us with facility, but Missouri State's not involved in directing the employees. I don't report to anybody at Missouri State University. My boss is Tom Carlson, the chairman of the board of the Daily Citizen. So we do our best to be independent. I think that specific story, honestly, two factors. One, as far as I know, we weren't aware of the story until charges had been made in court. And secondly, for better or worse, those charges were made a couple of days before Christmas. And during the holidays, it's just an especially difficult time for newsrooms to be able to handle news stories. Now, could we have gone back to it? Should we have gone back to it after the holidays? Perhaps we should have. And I think Cameron's questions are all valid questions, but to answer directly, nobody from Missouri State communicated with us in any way about the story, as far as I know, and certainly did not ask us to not cover it. I would note the campus essentially would have been closed. Looking at the calendar, probably the campus was already closed, and many of the campus spokespeople would have been unavailable during that time. But bottom line is, it's a legitimate story. We should have probably followed up on more.
Yeah, I agree, David. I mean, we really work hard to be independent of the university. We'll cover it just like we would the news leader or somebody that's not on campus. We don't shy away from stories at all just because it's MSU is involved. This was one, like David, like you said, that we didn't know about until charges were filed, and we did cover it then. You're right, right before it happened, right before Christmas, where people just weren't available to comment. I did talk to the head of security, to get some comment. They just were a bit reluctant to share much at that time. And I think, again, it was just because I think the campus was just getting ready to shut down. But, we did cover it. We didn't shy away from it. And, we should have maybe gone back after the holidays and tried to cover it more. But that being said, we do not shy away from any stories just because Missouri State University is involved. Just because we're on campus doesn't mean we are beholden to them in any way, shape, or form. We are very much an independent news organization.
And now we'll turn to a little bit of a different kind of question. Jackie, I'm going to ask you to start off with this one from Andrea Harp of Care to Learn. She asks whether there are any other ways that local organizations can be a better resource to you for stories, etc.
I think especially like nonprofits like Care to Learn. And well, it's kind of tricky with something like Care to Learn, but putting us in touch with the people that they're serving, that they're helping, always makes for a better, a richer story. It's one thing to talk to like the nonprofit executives, but to actually have conversations with the people that they're trying to help, I think helps the story quite a bit.
Yeah, one thing I would add too is don't assume that we know about your event, and try to let us know a few days ahead of time. I mean, we recently had someone approach us about covering a series of discussions about a relatively interesting topic. The event started on Sunday, and they contacted us on Friday afternoon. And honestly, we don't usually have somebody working on Sunday, so we really just couldn't respond to the request, even though, if we'd had a few more days notice, we might have figured out a way to do that. So organizations, it really, honestly, we don't mind if you send us a news release, or if you send us just a simple email saying, hey, would you be interested in a story like this? We'll give you the honest answer, whether we are or whether we have the resources to pursue your story, but don't assume we know your story.
A question from Kathleen Odell. And Christine, I'd like to start with you on this one and then move around the room. How would each of you rate your coverage of minority and diverse voices? And what are particular challenges that you have in making that coverage happen?
I think that it was in 2020. We had some really good feedback from the community on an awards program that we had put out, where we did not have diversity in that class of honorees. Honorees are selected based on folks, anyone can nominate. It's an independent panel of judges. We don't consider race in those or ethnicity in those, but it just wasn't diverse. And it led to a really good conversation that we had with the community that I think has expanded our coverage really well, which is that there was maybe a feeling that Springfield Business Journal was for a certain type of business and not all types of businesses. And that led us to say, well, if that's a perception, then people's perception is reality. And so we have made a really concerted effort to reach out to minority business associations. The Multicultural Business Association is a great one in town that highlights and promotes diverse business leaders in our community. Sharing and representing minority voices it's not a quota by any means. It is intentionality, and it is engaging with people in those communities and asking hard questions. Are we doing a good job? And what are your suggestions for us to be better? And then evaluating that. It's just like any other kind of story when we talk about covering all of the sides of an issue. Have we covered all of the voices of this issue? And are we ensuring that the entirety of our business community is represented in this? So that is incredibly important, and it's something that we love to have feedback on. And it's something that we're going to continue to try to be better at.
David, did you want to?
Sure. I mean, I think our reporters are keenly aware of wanting to bring diverse voices into our stories, and that goes beyond racial and ethnic diversity. But certainly that is an important aspect of it. But we try to be thoughtful about making sure that we're involving people with diverse points of view, people with diverse religious backgrounds, people with different abilities, and we actually have an advisory panel that meets quarterly. I think a couple of members of that panel are on this call tonight. That is challenging us and helping us learn more about it. To be blunt, to Kathleen's question, I think we do poorly. We could definitely do much better, but I think it's not for lack of interest on the part of the reporters. I think the reporters are keenly aware that we could do a better job of representing all types of diversity in our coverage.
While I know we're not going to be able to have time to get to every question, I do want to amalgamate a couple about the way that journalists and outlets tell stories. Jonathan Groves observes that the ways that we do tell those stories, especially in the face of social media, is changing and changing rapidly all the time. How is each outlet going to reach the next generation of news consumers, especially as more people actively avoid the news? And Dalton Fisher adds, is Apple News something that your outlets would consider? And Michelle, I'm going to start with you.
This is really a conversation we're just beginning to have. How can we reach those younger listeners whose listening habits are so different than mine or my parents, the generation before me and my generation? I'm not sure. I wish somebody out there could tell me what the answer is. I can tell you that it is a discussion that's ongoing. We want to be able to adapt and adjust, and we share our stories on social media outlets right now. Is that enough? Probably not. But yeah, I would love to get more younger people engaged with what we do.
Follow-up question already. Oh, I'm sorry, David.
Yeah, just let me, on the Apple News question. Unfortunately, I could publish every story to Apple News, but we would not be rewarded other than with traffic. And so it doesn't help us with our long-term business model in terms of relying on subscriptions. So we wouldn't get any revenue out of an Apple News link. So that's why we don't really use Apple News. I think we probably, Judy, have time for one more question before we need to close out.
Okay, then I'm going to turn it over to a question from Beth Spindler, who asks, the decline in jobs in journalism was mentioned earlier, and what does each of you see as a valuable way to keep young people involved in creating news that we can all access? And Christine, I'll start with you.
I think we all mentioned internships, and that's something that we invest in as an organization as well, training up the next generation of journalists. But it also hits to the question before, which is making content relevant and interesting and necessary for the youngest generation. If they see content that excites them, that makes them proud to be in that community, that's, a profession that they want to go into. So I think we have to consistently ask ourselves if we're relevant to all of our audiences. I think podcasts are one way that we've been exploring, getting news in a different way, using different social media outlets like Instagram. And I think definitely we could be better in those ways. But I think it's providing a good product that those journalists actually want, and then giving them opportunities to see what working in a newsroom's like.
I just would add, on our front, we actually are pleased to have a grant funded program funded by the Musgrave Foundation, the Community Foundation of the Ozarks, that is trying to figure out better ways to meet young people where they are in social media, whether it's in TikTok or whether it's in Instagram or some other places. And so our theory is if we could somehow translate our news into forms and formats and videos and other things that will catch that attention, that we can then tap into a network of young people who actually do care about the news and who do care about their community. So we're working on that and hoping that we can find some great ways to get more of our content out to those folks. And we appreciate the Musgrave Foundation support. So I'm going to, because I promised we would finish by 8, I'm going to close out the conversation tonight. I want to start by thanking our panelists, Michelle Skaliski, Jackie Raywald, and Christine Temple, for taking time. And of course, really want to thank all of you who took the time on a beautiful evening in Springfield to listen in, to send us your questions. I think there were some really great questions. I know that all of the panelists and myself would welcome your questions directly through email or phone calls. And you can probably find our contact information easily on each of our websites. I want to again thank Ozarks Public Radio, KSMU, for co-hosting our event tonight. And of course, Christine and the Springfield Business Journal for joining in the fun, and Ozarks Public Television for allowing us to rebroadcast the Sense of Community episodes. So very much thank you to all of the readers and listeners of our various publications. And because without you, what we do doesn't matter. We exist for you and because of you. So thank you all very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening.